Gilles Doucet, talking about the oil sector, how bad it is, how much it emits, and emissions are up in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and going on and on, creating this kind of divide, and saying, well, in Quebec, we've reduced our emissions. Let's not forget, Quebec runs on hydroelectricity. You have water to create electricity. We don't have that in Alberta. And so it's really easy to sit there and point fingers at other jurisdictions and say, well, you guys over there are the problem. We did it. Why can't you? Well, I mean, there are different realities here. So I think we have to take that into account. But I want to make sure that there is an understanding about the impact of the oil sector on the rest of the country. And that's partly why we're going to talk to my next guest.
What people need to understand, the extent of this resource is simply staggering. The amount of bitumen in place is about 1.7 trillion barrels, which exceeds all of the conventional oil reserves in the whole world today.
So for clarity's sake, in the 05 study, and these numbers are going to be, of course, magnified as you go further. In the 05 study, the number one recipient, the largest single recipient of money from the oil sands, the number one recipient was whom?
Was the federal government.
The federal government.
We were surprised ourselves to find that, actually. Tax revenues from all sources attributed to the oil sands went largely to the federal government.
41% of the generation of revenue from the oil sands go to the federal government. In this 20-year projection, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, but let's say 2005, the projection was $51 billion would go to the federal government between then and 2020 from the oil sands. $51 billion, more than the Alberta government, more than other provincial territorial governments, more than anything.
That is right.
And so, I think that's something that needs to be known. This country, I don't want to say it's being run by the oil sector, but it's getting a lot of money from it.
GDP impact will be here in Alberta. 30% is rest of Canada and outside of here. Tax revenues, we will find about half, we think, is in Alberta, and the other half is beyond its borders. So again, but all of these will be much higher in absolute terms than what we found before. The breakdown still, it's not an Alberta benefit. It's an Alberta resource with a countrywide benefit.
In Quebec and then the rest of Canada in your last research. Talked about the GDP impact, the gross domestic product in Ontario, $102 billion, right?
Yeah.
Quebec, $8 billion. The rest of Canada, $45 billion. I mean, these are huge numbers, Marwan, and that was in 04, based on $32 oil and the projection then. I assume these numbers are going to go higher.
They will go higher, for sure, because two things have happened since then. The price of oil has gone way above $32, right, and that's used to value the output, right, and therefore the economic impact, as well as we mentioned before, the production levels are rising and the investment levels are rising.
Paying attention to the mainstream media in Southern Ontario. But I have not heard a lot of conversation about the $102 billion input into the province of Ontario from the oil sands. I haven't heard that.